the agenda, it's going to be tent versus hammock. Which one I prefer? Spoiler alert, it's going to be hammock 95% of the time. I will say, the obligatory hike your own hike, and this is just my opinion, and all that crap. So yeah, just do whatever. I'm just giving you some options. I'll be talking about the pros and cons of each. Some of the pros for one thing will be cons for the other, and vice versa. And after that, I'll talk about the differences in weight and the differences in price. I've seen a lot of discussion that one or the other is lighter or cheaper. But again, I'm just going to show you the different setups that I personally have just to give you some ideas. So let's check it out. We'll start with the pros of using a tent setup. One of the things I like about a tent setup is that you always have a sleeping pad with you. So if you come across a shelter on the trail and you want to stay in the shelter, you don't have to set up your tent, tear it down in the morning. You always have that sleeping pad with you. Of course, you can use a sleeping pad in a hammock, but it's way less comfortable than an underquilt, which we'll get into. A tent also, now this tent is the only tent that I really have, and it is a rather large tent. This is a trekking pole tent, but if you have a tent that is a freestanding tent where you have separate poles, separate fly and everything, one of the advantages is if you have two people that are staying in the tent, say you have a 3-person tent, you can split up the parts. One person can carry the fly and the poles. One person can carry the body of the tent. One of the other big advantages of having a tent is that it can be set up in a field. You obviously don't need trees. Sticking with the tent, let's talk about some of the cons that I found. I just don't like crawling out of a tent. Also with a tent, one of the things I don't like is carrying a sleeping pad. I don't have one of those accordion style closed cell foam pads, but every time I see somebody carrying one, it just seems extremely bulky to carry around one of those. But as far as the air mattresses that you have to blow up, first of all, I don't like blowing those things up. Even worse than that, I don't like trying to fold them down, get all the air out in the morning, and pack them back up. And knock on wood, I haven't had this one happen yet. But getting a hole in the mattress and trying to find and fix that in the middle of the night just seems like it would be a major hassle, especially if there's something wrong with the seal on the nozzle. And moving on to the hammock, some of the pros about the hammock. I love setting up in porch mode with the tarp. Especially when it's raining out and everybody else is stuck inside their tents and I have that nice view of the forest. I'm just sitting there looking at the rain coming down, nice and comfortably seated in my hammock the whole time. And that is my second pro about the hammock, is that it doubles as a chair. Now obviously you can't set it up right next to the fire pit or anything like that, but if you just want to go lounge in your hammock, you got a perfect chair. And like I said, one of the cons about the tent is now a pro of the hammock is that I don't have to crawl out of it in the morning. Just swing my legs out and I'm already in a seated position. I personally find the hammock to be way more comfortable than sleeping on the ground, and I think a lot of people would agree with that. When you're buying a hammock, they're much more customizable than a tent. When you buy a tent, you're pretty much stuck to what they offer. There's not a whole lot of customization you can do. With a hammock, you can use a different suspension system. You can mix and match. They offer a lot more choices of different fabrics. You can go without a bug net, with a bug net. A lot of different add-ons that you can for like storage, for example. In my newest hammock, this is my newest hammock here. This I opted to get it with the bug net for now, and I can change out the bug net for a winter top cover. It just zips on a different cover, so I have a different option there. But I just for now just bought the bug net for it. I've also noticed a whole lot less condensation with a hammock as opposed to a tent. Even though I have a double wall tent, there's still the condensation factor. Every once in a while, I will get some condensation on my quilts in a hammock, or on the tarp. I'll sometimes get condensation, but it's nowhere near as big a deal as in a tent. And one more pro about using a hammock is you can set it up over uneven ground. You don't have to worry about rocks. You don't have to worry about roots. And that has really been an advantage to me quite a few times for my site selection. Moving on to the cons of using a hammock. A lot of people say there is less privacy, and I could see that. But if you set up your tarp correctly, you'll have just as much privacy as you would in a tent. One of the biggest cons about using a hammock is you obviously need trees, and the trees have to be spaced the correct distance apart. And of course, you can't set up a hammock in a field or above tree line, so you're kind of at a disadvantage there. Although there are ways you can kind of ground camp, it's not the most spectacular thing. A hammock also is a little bit more difficult to for a beginner, I would think, because of just the adjustments you have to make for the suspension system in particular, and setting up the tarp in different configurations. It's not like you have a freestanding tent and you're just sliding the poles through and bam, the thing's set up and ready to go. The last con that I came up with for the hammock system is, if you're camping with your dog can't stay in the hammock with you, or dog's gonna have to stay underneath you or whatever. If you're taking your kid camping and you're sharing a tent, you don't have that option with a hammock. They'd have to set up their own hammock or a tent on the side or something. Moving on, let's talk about just a few other things real quick. What I like to do, usually what I have been doing lately, is when we're camping somewhere and we're starting at, say, 9 a.m. and it's a 4-hour drive for me, what I like to do is go the night before and I'll have my pack set up already, ready to go for the next morning, with my hammock set up in my pack. And then I will just car camp somewhere and set up my tent, so in the morning I can just tear down the tent, throw it in my trunk, and I don't have to touch my pack. Pack's still ready to go the next morning. Also, real quick, I wanted to mention that I just have a piece of Tyvek here. I use it as my ground sheet to kind of just keep things organized, easier to see on a white underneath my hammock, because this being white, I can see where everything's at. It's less likely that I'm going to lose something if I can see it easier on this. But I also will use this as like the inside the vestibule of my tent. So just another piece to carry right here. But this weighs nothing and just packs down to nothing. As far as trekking poles, I deliberately got a trekking pole tent because I always have trekking poles with me. I don't need a freestanding tent. I don't want to have to carry extra poles. But I also use those trekking poles for porch mode with my tarp when I'm in my hammock. I'm not going to take that into either consideration for tents or hammocks. One last thing I want to say about hammocks is I highly recommend not getting one of those Eno hammocks that they sell at REI. They're just basically like a lounging hammock that you would set up to take a break in, maybe take a quick nap. But for an overnighter, that was my first hammock, and for an overnighter, it lasted about 2 trips before I got rid of it. I couldn't. It's just way too uncomfortable to spend an entire night in. But they are cheap, they are lightweight, so if that's within your budget or whatever, go for it, give it a try. Hey, my tent, this is the Tarp Tent Stratospire Li Dyneema tent. It is somewhat big. It is 28.6 ounces, and I know there are lighter tents. This is a 2-person tent. But yeah, I'm just showing you what I have, and we'll discuss some total weights after I go through everything. The stakes to come with this tent, these are 2.3 ounces for these stakes. This is a Dyneema bag, and let me just show you real quickly because I changed out the stakes that came with it for the most part. I went for these Sea to Summit. They're kind of like a V shape, but they do have like a little spine on them also. I don't know if you can see it or not, but these are Sea to Summit. They're nice and small. So far, I like them. I like that they have these things here for the tie outs. My tent takes 6 of these, and then I also have the original stakes that came with the tent. These, if I just want to do an extra tie out, I have 2 of these in this pack also. Just so that I don't lose these, I just keep them right in the stuff sack with the tent. I do like to use the stuff sack with this. This just stays on the outside of my pack. In my current sleeping pad of choice, 34.4 ounces, quite a bit heavier. I did a little bit of research before I got this with the Big Annis Q-Core Deluxe. I did some research. I did want a wide pad, 25 by 72, but I didn't realize how bulky this thing is. So I know there's a lot of lighter options, smaller options. In fact, let me show you a couple real quick. These are 2 of my older pads. Obviously, this is much smaller than that Big Agnes pad, but this is non-insulated and it's only 20 inches wide. This is the Climate Static V, and the Climate Static V insulated, same size as this one. But I generally am not doing much more than car camping with my current tent setup, so I'm fine with the Big Agnes. As far as when I'm sleeping on the ground in a tent or in a shelter, I take the Trekology A-Loft pillow. I don't bother with the stuff sack. I just crush this down and just jam it into wherever little spaces in my pack there are. 3 breaths to blow this thing up, and it gets my head off the ground a little bit more than the than my hammock pillow, which we'll get to shortly. I do like that this has the strap on it, so it keeps it from sliding around on my pad. And yeah, it's relatively cheap also. This weighs 3.7 ounces. For the Big Agnes pad, I take this Flextail pump. It weighs 3.3 ounces. The reason I take this is it takes quite a bit more to blow up that larger pad than the two climate pads I have take about 15 breaths to blow those up, so that's not a big deal. This also has a light on it, which I like, and I put the carabiner on here to attach it from like a ridgeline or whatever. I have a couple top quilts, but I'm just going to talk about this one real quick. This is the Hammock Gear Econ. This is the one I usually take. It's rated to 40 degrees, so it gets me through a good majority of the year. This one weighs 17.7 ounces. As far as my current hammock, which you may have seen recently, I just did a video on this. This is the Dutchware Chameleon, and this is 18.1 ounces. That includes the ridgeline organizer that I put on it. Not too extremely heavy, although it is heavier than the previous one that broke. The previous one was 8.9 ounces, but I just don't trust the Cloud 71 fabric anymore. I would not recommend the Cloud 71 fabric. This is Hexon 1.2 fabric. This is also from Dutchware, an argon pillow. It weighs 1.9 ounces. This is the little loop here that attaches that I can keep it from sliding around or falling out of the hammock. And as you can see, much thinner than a blow-up pillow. And this is all I really need in the hammock. In fact, I've forgotten this quite a few times, and I'm still just as comfortable. This just adds a little bit more, slightly more comfort, and because of the filling that's inside here, it's just a little bit extra warmth for my head. This is a Hammock Gear tarp DCF with doors. This is how small they get. This is 10 ounces right here, what I'm holding in my hand, including, you know, all the lines, all the hardware that's attached to this, the snake skin that this is, this mesh snake skin that this is in. That's 10 ounces. This is extremely light. I love this thing. Although it is expensive, we'll talk about shortly. This is my stake bag for my hammock setup. A little bit bigger and bulkier. This is 4.2 ounces as opposed to, you know, whatever I said the stake bag was for my tent. But the reason why this is bigger and bulkier, this is an old tent stake bag that I had with my very first tent that I ever had. The stakes with this, I used these full-size MSR groundhogs. I could probably switch these out for this mini groundhogs. But I keep the line attached to the stakes on this setup. It's just easier because of the hardware that I use, and all these the weights that I'm including, all the hardware and things for this. I have 4 of these in here for the tarp, and I also have 2 titanium shepherd's hooks, which see if I can dig out. And these are both I can't dig them out right now, but you know what a titanium shepherd hooks look like. And those were both found at campsites, so those were basically free. And we'll tie this up later. I already talked about the 17.7 ounce top quilt that I use. I use the same top quilt for a hammock or tent, but this is my under quilt for my hammock. This is also the Hammock Gear Econ version. 21.6 ounces for this one, and this is rated to 30 degrees. And I have yet to have a problem with it, except when I don't adjust the ends correctly after it's been sitting for a while. 8.5 ounces for the straps. I keep them in this bag in case they're wet or in case they get sap on them. I'm not going to get, you know, because I do like to keep these inside my pack, so it keeps everything else protected. Now in here I do have the Dutchware spider straps with the Dutch hooks. Obviously 2 of these. I experimented earlier this year. I went and got some whoopee slings. I had some old Eno whoopee slings, which were just garbage. But I tried these, and I'm still not sure which one I like better. I'm just going to keep these in my strap bag. They're pretty much don't take up a whole lot of room or weigh much. I'm just going to keep them in there so I still have the options until I figure out for sure which setup I want to use. I think I can get a little further of a reach with these, so just keep them in here just in case I need them. Let's take a look at some of the costs of some of this stuff. Now this tent right now, all these prices I'm giving you are the most recent prices that I found online. $719 for this tent. Now I bought it off of a friend of mine who takes extremely good care of his gear. So it was basically brand new when I bought it off him. Got it for $540 from him. You know, that's with he gave me the stakes and everything too, so that was cool. So these can be pretty pricey, especially if you're going with DCF. This pad sells for $154. Kind of mid-range for some of the sleeping pads. Like this one here, I think is going for $49. This one's selling for $78 right now. The Aleph pillow, 18 bucks for this. So yeah, good deal, very good deal on the pillow. The top quilt's selling for $225 currently. And the flex tail pump, $25. This hammock with the bug net, because the bug net was separate, $170, which I don't think is too extreme compared to how much I spent on that tent. Argon pillow, 20 bucks. As far as my hammock setup, the biggest expense was the tarp, $469 here down. Now that does include all the lines, the snake skin, all the hardware that I put that I have attached to it. I have a few pieces of Dutchware hardware. Right here, you can see the Dutch hook. Bought that separately. The Dutch wasp. I have Nama claws on the ridge line. So yeah, that was a bit pricey for this, but well worth it. The stakes that I have in here, I spent a total of $42 on. I already mentioned $225 for my top quilt. The under quilt is currently selling for $230, so there's a pretty hefty investment as far as quilts. And that is the Econ version of those quilts too. I believe the total cost for my straps, including including these ones and the whoopies, I think $35 for everything that I have in my strap bag. Totaling everything up, my current tent setup costs $962. That's with buying the tent used. If I was to buy the tent brand new, then my total cost would be $1,141. My current hammock setup, very similar at $1,197. The weights are actually very similar also. My current tent setup, 89.9 ounces, which is 5.6 pounds. My current hammock setup is 82 ounces. That includes the tarp and everything, which is 5.2 pounds. I know there are lighter tents, there are lighter sleeping pads, etc. Just wanted to give my opinion, some different options as far as maybe somebody's not sure whether they want a tent or a hammock. Um, you know, somebody that's a tenter is thinking about hammocking or vice versa. So yeah, that's all I got for this one. And thanks for watching.